terrifying and violent scene in Albuquerque yesterday when people gathered to demand the removal of a statue of a brutal conquistador responsible for massacring indigenous people. An armed right-wing militia showed up to defend the statue, and one armed man shot a protester. As a warning, some people may find the following video upsetting. Now, it's unclear what happened immediately before this. It appears the man in the blue shirt, Stephen Baca Jr., was kind of defending the statue. Baca pushes a protester. The crowd turns on him. He's hit with a skateboard. About 15 seconds later, a protester tackled him. And then Baca got up. He was holding a handgun, and he fires 4 shots, heard on the video, shooting one protester who is still in critical condition tonight. Police took Baca into custody and detained several militiamen as well. In a Facebook post, the militia group said Baca is not one of their members. Local news reports say he's a right-wing former city council candidate. Joining me now, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. Governor, what is your understanding of what happened last night, and how is your state responding to it?
Well, 2 things. Frankly, you got what we understand to be the facts as we're starting the investigation exactly right. We are incredibly horrified and disturbed. We're about to go into a budget special session, starts on Thursday, and police reform and racial injustice are going to be topics that we will get through in a couple of days to see if we can't do better than the militarization of our police and having militia engaged only to provoke violence at peaceful protests. These have to be addressed. The state has a clear role to make a difference here.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, what was so unnerving about last night, and it's something that's been going through my head through much of this, is, you know, things are just different when people are armed. I think we would all agree, right? If you see 1,000 people in the street protesting, that's one thing. If 1,000 people in the street are protesting and they're all carrying guns, that's another. If 500 are on each side and they're all carrying guns, that's another entirely. Like, how do you understand this in terms of the role that weapons play or folks coming armed to these kinds of events?
So, Chris, a couple of years ago, I was talking to New Mexicans and folks across the country that this country, it occurs to me, has a very negative gun culture. And when I became elected governor, one of the first things I did was instruct our Department of Health to treat gun violence as the public health epidemic that, frankly, it is. And there is no question that when you are gathering or marching or protesting, and there's a group of armed citizens with automatic weapons who are completely dressed in military gear, their only role is to provoke and to seek intimidation of individuals who are peacefully protesting. And this horrific example that played out in Albuquerque, you know, I have been incredibly grateful that we haven't had such a situation, given the last 20 plus days in this country and the incredible work of peaceful protesters. But make no mistake, this is not the first time this particular militia has been engaging in public. And I think it's time we find a way to be clear. All our constitutional rights are valid. My constitutional right to be safe in my community needs to be upheld. And we have got to stop this intimidation and stop allowing armed men and women whose only purpose is to create havoc and harm at these gatherings. It's unacceptable, and we have the ability to do something about it right now in this country. And New Mexico I intend to do something about it.
I want to read you something that Simon Romero, who's a New York Times reporter whose work I followed forever. He's reported in Latin America for years. He said, "I've covered violent street protests in Caracas and Rio and never felt as threatened as last night in Albuquerque. At one point, an armed militia member taunted me for working at the New York Times. No police were in sight. Why did authorities cede control of the scene to extremist gunmen?" Do you have an answer to that? Do you think that's a fair question?
It's an incredibly fair question, and it's why the state is going to investigate this action last night and not allow the investigation internally by the local police. Why did they allow the militia to be present? Where were they? Why did they only show up? I'm hearing reports 21 minutes after 911 calls were made. Where were they? When they showed up, it was more like a SWAT presence. Why were they shooting rubber bullets at peacefully fleeing protesters? Why did they allow the shooter, Mr. Baca, to engage with protesters before the actual horrific incident that has a young man fighting for his life in our hospital? There were plenty of warning signs, and I fear that we have some folks in our law enforcement entities who I think have promoted potentially the efforts of these militia. And we intend to independently investigate that and determine exactly what's going on. So I agree with the New York Times reporter, and I'm a lifelong New Mexican and lived in Albuquerque for decades before having this incredible job. And I've never seen anything like that anywhere in our state. And no doubt the militia played a violent role in what occurred, and we will do something about it.
New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, thank you so much for making some time for us tonight.